Hey there, Solomon here with iCode Stuff, bringing you back another video. I know I've been uploaded a video for the past 9 months, I believe. I've just been busy with my current full-time job, nerdery, and then I also have been working on this side project called HoopSpots. So with those two things, I've just really haven't had time to upload videos. But in the past 9 months, I've been working with a new tech stack with my side project with HoopSpots. We've been building a mobile app. It's a React Native mobile app, and then we have a Golang and GraphQL backend. And so in these past 9 months, I've learned a lot about Golang and GraphQL as well as Docker. And there's been a lot of growing pains, a lot of issues I've run into. So I felt like that was an opportunity to create a video. Specifically today, I just want to show you how to get started with Docker Compose for Golang and MySQL. It's going to be a very, very simple API that we set up that calls on a MySQL database, and then it's going to be powered by Docker. So the actual API is going to be powered by Docker, and the database, the MySQL database, will be hosted by a Docker container as well. So let's hop in the code and let's get started. So being a Golang application, the first thing we're going to have to do is run go mod init. And we'll just call this Golang Docker MySQL tutorial. Oh, we're gonna have to export our go mod here. All right, rerun that. Cool. So we've created a go mod that just allows us to have a directory or Go directory to work with to actually run the Go project. And the next thing we're going to want to do is create a main.go file. Here we are. And we'll just call this main. And then we're going to need our main function, of course. Oops, func main. If I can type. All right. As I mentioned, we're just going to be setting up a simple API. And Golang has a lot of internal packages that allows us to set up our server. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function called homepage. And this will be the function that handles the when we hit the homepage URL. So that's going to take in a response writer. And it's also going to take in a HTTP request. All right. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to print to the screen that this is the homepage. We'll just do a printf. Welcome to the homepage. And this is not just printf, printf. And then we're just going to print another line and just saying hit the homepage endpoint. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to handle that homepage method. So we got to do HTTP handle function, and we're going to pass in the root URL, and then we're going to say homepage. All right. And I believe if we actually run this, we should be good to go. Go run main. Oh, whoops. We're going to have to listen on the server. So log.fatal. This will just log.fatal will only run if the if it fails to run our server. So we're just going to run it on port 8080. Pass in nil. Rerun that. And then if we pull up the browser, localhost 8080, pull that over. All right, so here we are. Welcome to the homepage. So that basic URL is set up. Now we're going to actually set up the database schema. we're going to want to pull data from a MySQL database, of course. So we're going to eventually create another method. We'll probably just like have a database called users, and we'll just create a users page method or something like that, and that will just essentially call the MySQL database powered by Docker and pull that data into our API. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a database directory, and we're going to have a file, and we're going to call it migration.sql. And what we're going to do is we're just going to create a single table. We'll just call it users. And we're going to have a couple columns. We're going to have an ID. We're going to have a name. Varchar 255. And it can't be null. And then the primary key is going to be our ID, of course. And then we're just going to have some fake data in there. So we're going to insert some names. We'll just say John Doe, Jane Doe, and any other fake name I can think of. That should be good for now, actually. Cool. So that's just for when we run the migration with Docker. We're going to pull that up in a second. So we have our database schema set up. We have the boilerplate for the Golang API. Now we're going to have to get into setting up the actual Docker files. So we're going to have a couple Docker files. We're going to have a Docker file for the API. We're going to have a Docker file for the database. And then, of course, we're going to have the Docker compose.yaml file. So what we can do first is we can create our Docker compose file. So we'll say Docker compose.yaml. So we're going to use version 3.7. That's just the one that I've been using lately. And we're going to have two services. We're going to have a database service, and we're going to call this tutorial DB. Platform, or not platform. Oh wait, I am on an M1, so I have to use platform Linux x86 64, and this is only for if you have an M1, because I know there's some like incompatibility with Docker and the new Mac M1 chips. And then we're going to have our build. For context, we're just going to use the current directory. And then for our Docker file, we're going to call it database.dockerfile. As I mentioned, we're going to have the database Docker file, and we're going to have the API Docker file. And then for our networks, we're just going to use the default network. Default. And then restart. We'll say always. And then our port. So we're just going to use a standard 3306 for our MySQL ports. You could change it to whatever you want. And then lastly, we're going to need our environment variables. So we're going to have the MySQL random root password. We're just going to give it a basic password. Of course, you would never want to do this in production, but we're just going to call it secret. We're going to have the MySQL database. We'll call it test database. MySQL user. We're going to call them test user. For the MySQL password for that user, we're just going to use secret again. All right, so I think we have our necessary variables set up. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set up our volumes. And we're just going to bind our MySQL data to the MySQL library. And then for our command that we want to run, this is a common command that you'll see whenever you run MySQL for the first time. This is just a script, pretty quick and easy. All right, so I think we have everything set up for our database. Of course, we're going to need to create our db.docker file to make sure that exists. We're not going to add anything quite yet. All right, and the next service we want is the API. And for our container name, we're just going to call it tutorial API. For our build, we're going to use the current directory again. And then we're going to use a Docker file called api.dockerfile, and we'll create that really quickly. api.dockerfile. And these are just our, so if you guys are, oops, that's not right. And if you guys aren't familiar with, oh, I kind of lost my train of thought. I'll probably get it back later, but we'll just create our api.docker file properly this time. All right. So next up, we just want to set our ports again. We'll just use port 8080 to be easy. And then this container is going to depend on our database. So the API is dependent on the database. So we're going to pass that in, depends on. We'll just say that. And then for our volumes, we're just going to bind our current directory to the app directory for Docker. All right. And then for our networks, we're just going to use our default network again. And then for our volumes, we're going to pass in that MySQL data. So volumes, MySQL data, set. Cool. So now we're just going to want to add to our database Docker file. So we're going to use MySQL 8. MySQL 8, I think it's 0.0.23, I believe. And this is very, very simple. All we're going to do here is we're going to copy the database migration file. So all migration files here. So we'll just say .sql. And then we're going to export that to the Docker entry point. And that'll initialize our database .d. All right. So yeah, that should be very simple. That's all we need for the database Docker file. We're gonna have to create another file, and we're just gonna, it's gonna be a basic shell script. So one thing I've noticed or learned along my way of working with Docker and the database and the API, it's not enough to just say depends on. It also has to wait for the database to start. So we're going to rely on this third-party package called wait for it. And so what we're going to do is create our entry point .shell file. That's fine. We can install that. But yeah, so it's basically going to wait for our database port to be set up, database host and database port. And this is just using the environmental variables from Docker. And the reason why, like as I mentioned, is like if you don't have this file and you run the Docker Compose build and Docker Compose up, your API will start after the database is started. However, it won't, because we have this command in our Docker Compose file, we have to wait for this command to run. So that's why we have that wait for it script here. And then we're also going to use a convenient package called compile daemon. And what this will allow us to do is it'll allow us to update our main.go file, and it will automatically update every time we make a change to it. So Go is a compiled language, so typically you have to restart, like you have to like cancel the command and then rerun Go run to like start up your command. But with this package, it automatically rebuilds for us, so it's nice and convenient. Go, and so it's just going to build the main file for us, and it acts like an npm watcher, if you guys are familiar with that. So just watch for .go file changes. We'll just say that, and we're going to use this entry point .shell script in our api.docker file. The API Docker file is a bit more complex, so we're going to use an Alpine, Golang Alpine image, if I can spell Alpine, and our working directory is going to be the app directory. So if we go back to our Docker compose file, we can see that's where our working directory is going to live. So we can just say working dir and then /app. And then what we have to do is we're going to have to run some APK updates, and then APK add a couple libraries. So libc, APK add the GCC compiler, and then APK add the make script. All right, and then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to copy our Go mod. And when we we're going to install a database package, so it's going to create a Go mod and then go.sum within the Go mod directory or file. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy those two files, go.sum, into our working directory. And then what we want to do is run go mod download and go mod verify that those packages are correct. Next up, we just want to install that compile daemon that allows us to watch our Go files. So we can say run go git github.com. I believe his package is GitHub Nemo, and it's just compile daemon. And as I mentioned earlier, that's just for when we run this script here. Next up, we're going to want to copy that directory into their directory, and then copy the entry point .shell file into the directory. And then lastly, we're going to want to add that wait for it package here. So we're going to copy and paste that script. I believe it's on GitHub that allows us to use the wait for it script. It doesn't ship with Alpine by default, so that's the reason why we have to use the wait for it. But if we copy it from over here and we paste it, we can just see that it's just calling that wait for it script. It's adding it. And it's running some, it's changing some directory permissions to allow us to run the wait for it directly from our shell file. And then lastly, we're going to need the entry point for the Docker file. And we're just going to use this entry point shell file. So we can just say shell sh. And this is what Docker is going to run on its side. And then entry point .sh. So this command will get ran every time our Docker compose is run. All right, so it looks like we have all of our Docker files set up. The next step, what we're gonna want to do is we're gonna want to set up that MySQL and Golang connection. So as I mentioned earlier, we don't want to just have the homepage route. We're going to want to have a users page, so it's going to grab our users from our database when it's created. But what we have to do first is we're going to have to get the SQL driver for MySQL. So go SQL driver MySQL. All right, and so if we open this, we can see the go.sum file. This is the file I was talking about earlier within our api.docker file. So that's where this lives right here. But now we have the actual driver for it. So the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to actually want to create our get user script. So this is going to get users from the database. So the first thing we want to do is create a get users method. And before that, we should probably create a struct called user. And it's just going to mirror what we have in our migration file. So the users table only has an ID and a name. So that's what our struct will reflect. So we'll say type user struct. We're going to have an ID, and that's going to be an int. Cool. And then we're going to have a name, and that's going to be a string. And for JSON, here we are. Cool. So the first thing now with the get users method, we're going to want to initialize our database connection. So open up DB connection, and that's where that SQL driver comes in handy. So DB error SQL.open. For our driver, we're using MySQL, and then the data source is, I believe it's just going to be the user colon the password at the host of the Docker image, I believe. So for our variables, let's go back to our Docker compose file. So for our user, we have test user. So the test user. For our password, we use secret, and we're going to use a TCP connection. And then this is where, so our host is literally just going to be the Docker compose. So this is considered our host here, so DB. So more often than not, you'll use like localhost or 127.0.0.1. But with Docker, it's much simpler. So we'll just copy DB, and we'll say DB port 3306, and we're just going to use the database name. So if we go back to our Docker compose file, we'll just use that. Perfect. And then if there's an error, we want to check if there's an error with our connection. So check if error with DB connection. So what we're going to do is we're going to check if this is nil or null. They say nil in Go. And we're going to panic. So just break here. We'll just say error. All right. And then we're going to want to defer. We're going to want to defer that database connection. So we're going to say defer db.close. So that won't do it right away. Cool. So this is literally just our initializing database initializer. More often than not, you would abstract it to a different method, but because this is a very simple tutorial, I'm just going to have it all in one method. Cool. So next up, we're going to want to just grab our results. So this is going to execute a query. So we're going to have results and a potential error, and we're just going to say db.query, and we're just going to select all from users. Cool. And then same thing here. If an error, just panic. Otherwise, we're going to loop through our results and assign it to a user's variable. So we're going to say var users, and it's going to be a pointer for the user. It's going to be a pointer of I don't know how to say it. So it's going to be an array of user pointers. So we're going to loop through our results. We'll say results.next. We're going to create a temporary user variable. And then we're just going to assign this user variable to the results ID and name. So what we're going to do is for each result, just scan each result. So error is equal to results.scan, and we're just going to assign the user.id and the user.name. All right. And then if there's an error, again, we're just going to want to panic. Cool. Otherwise, we're just going to append the users to our, or we're going to append the user to our users variable up here. Say users, and it's going to be a pointer. Perfect. And then with the get users function, we want to return a array of user pointers. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say return users, but we're going to get an error or some squiggly lines saying, hey, add that as a return type. So basically what we have to do is copy this right here, and this will be our return type because Go is a strict language. Cool. So that's our get users method, and we're going to use that get users method within our users handler. So next up, we're going to create a function called users page, func user page, and very similar. We're just going to copy this and kind of bunch them together. So we'll put that down here. But yeah, we're just going to grab our users. Well, first off, we want to make sure our parameters are correct. So we're going to grab some users from that get users method. And then we're just going to say this is hit the users page endpoint. And then we're going to encode, we're going to return some JSON as if this were an actual API. Pass in the writer, and then we're going to encode our users. Perfect. Cool. So I haven't tested any of this code quite yet because we haven't run the Docker Compose build and up commands. So first thing we got to do now is run Docker Compose build. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is run Docker build, or let's make sure our Docker dashboard looks correct. If you guys are following along this tutorial, I expect you guys to have Docker installed already. Otherwise, it's kind of counterproductive to watch this. So it looks like I have a Docker container running already. I'm just going to remove these containers right now. I don't need them. And then any images, we can delete these right now. Cool. All right. So what we're going to do is Docker Compose build. And that might take a little bit, so I can pause the video until that finishes. So our Docker build had run successfully. So what we can do next is run Docker compose up. We might see some errors. Let's check it out. Crossing our fingers. Let's hope it works. Let's hope it works. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to our browser, so it looks like it works. Oh, we got to add our users route, and that will take in the users page. And with that compile daemon that we added, the compile daemon here, this should actually upload or update live. So if I click my terminal, it reran the build command and updated our files. So let's refresh. That's there. If we go to users, all right, so it looks like the user's path is not working. Let's check it out. Why? So unknown driver MySQL. Perhaps we forgot to import it. Yep, we did forget to import it. So this is a sneaky one. I hated this problem. We ran into this issue before, my developers and I. So what we have to do is import the MySQL driver directly. So SQL driver, MySQL, sort imports. And for my IDEs, I'm using Golang, if you guys are familiar with that. I know VS Code's pretty popular for Go as well, but I ended up just forking the cache for this JetBrains IDE. It's just really, really good. But yeah, so let's go back. So that reran. All right. So if we go back and refresh, perfect. Okay, so looks like it worked properly, but I don't think our database was seeded correctly. So let's check out what's going on there. So after doing some digging, I believe I found our culprit of why our database wasn't properly populated, and that was because in the script I didn't specify what column we are updating. We were supposed to be updating the name column, but it was missing this right here. So MySQL had no idea what to do when it was adding this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to actually remove our database containers. So I'm going to stop our Docker compose script, and I'm going to pull up our Docker dashboard. And what I'm going to do is, you don't have to do this every time. This is just for the tutorial. I want it to run smoothly this time. So I'm just going to delete our container. And then for our images, I'm just going to remove these as well. Perfect. And then what I'm going to do is we're just going to rerun our Docker compose build. I'm going to have a GitHub for this, so you guys probably won't run into this issue. Perhaps you guys probably caught my error already with my SQL script. If you did, great job. But yeah, so we're just going to rerun our Docker compose build. We'll pause there. Our Docker compose ran correctly this time, and we'll rerun Docker compose up. Hopefully it actually populates our database correctly this time. Perfect. Huh. That did not go through this time either. So what ended up happening? I believe, our volume. We have to update our volumes. So give me a moment to do that. So as many of you may know, Docker uses volumes to persist its data. So in order for us to actually get our script to work properly, we're going to have to remove our Docker volume. So we'll remove Docker volume for this here. And hopefully, oh, we're missing the remove. Perfect. And hopefully if we rerun our Docker compose and Docker build, it'll properly run this time. So we'll just say Docker compose build. That's done. Docker compose up. And that might take a little bit. But yeah, this was definitely not intended. Had I properly put the name column here, we probably wouldn't be running into these errors or issues right now. But it's also a good learning experience by just like watching me debug our issue here. So hopefully it works this time. It's still loading. Takes a while for the database volume to get set up. So yeah, I'll just pause it until that is done. So I believe our script had properly went through this time. So if we go to our endpoint, so welcome to the home page again, and then go to the users endpoint, we can see our data, so John Doe and Jane Doe, and that's directly from our seeder command right here. So inserting into the users these two values. So that went through successfully. So yeah, that's really, I know this video went a bit longer than expected, but I feel this could probably save someone a lot of time compared to, the time that my developers and I put into research how to set this up. So it probably took us like 2 days to figure out how to get this to work. If you are exploring this video or coming across it, you can probably figure out how to set up a Docker container for your Go API and MySQL database within 40 minutes now. So yeah, this is really all we have here. So yeah, if you guys made it to the end, I appreciate it. I will probably be making more Golang videos, as I did learn a lot these past 9 months, so I really want to pay that knowledge forward just to help some people who are also going on their Golang journey as well. So I appreciate you guys watching till the end, and I am out to the next one. Take care. Bye bye.